Hi everyone, hope everyone is well. Tonight I am playing Screaming Eagles Band of Brothers by Worthington. This is a World War II tactical game. I featured it quite a bit on my channel a few years ago, and it's been our bookcase over there. It's been sat there on the shelves looking at me, and I haven't featured a game from it on my channel for a little while. So I thought, now's a good time to put it off the shelf, get it onto the table and play a game. I've always felt with this series should have perhaps had more attention than it gets. I think there's about 4 games and a couple of expansions as well. And it's got a lot going for it. There's a lot about this game that I really like. I've featured, I've done a couple of AARs in the past, and I've done a review of two of the games in the series and enjoyed them very much. So I've got the game on the table, ready to play, and let's have a look. So as you can see, this is a fairly straightforward 2-map game scenario. A lot of scenarios in this game are 2 maps, but there's quite a few that are 3, 4. I think there's even a 5-map game, and the maps are geomorphic. So we've got the map set up here. Now the setting is we are in Holland, September the 17th, 1944. Operation Market Garden, of course. The paratroopers, so the US Airborne, were to seize bridges along Highway 69 in Holland to aid the British advance. Elements of the 506th were to take the main bridge over the I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Wilhelmina. That's terrible pronunciation, Matt. But over the canal, just south of Son, as well as the secondary spans, one to the east and one to the west of the town. So in this scenario, let's have a quick look at the object. The American player wins by having a unit on board 5, which is this board here. Hex Echo 5 at the end of any turn. Echo 5 is the bridge. So if we can get an American unit onto the bridge, then thematically the Americans have taken the bridge, and well done to them. And the Germans are going to try and stop them. Now there's a couple of points that are quite interesting. It's a 5-turn scenario, so the Americans don't have a lot of time, and as you can see from the setup, these rather menacing German 88s set up here. They are in foxholes, which gives them some cover, so they're not out in the open. And there's some German troops on this side of the canal, and there's some troops there on that side of the canal. Now the Americans start with these 4 units here. We've got some rifle squads and an MG squad as well. But the Americans do get a series of reinforcements for turns 2, which are these units here, turn 3, these units here, and turn 4 with these units here. And they are going to need them. Looking at my notes, the last time I played this, Americans did not win. Those 88s made short work of them as they tried to cross this open ground. So really, the obvious sort of tactic is to try and play defensive and try and firefight it out. The truth is, you're not really going to win against 88s in that scenario. And remember, the objective is to take that hex there. So this time, I'm going to play it quite a lot more aggressively. And we're going to use the weapon team, so the MG, to see if they can lay down suppressing fire and move the troops up across this open ground and try and assault the 88s in close combat. It's a risky move, but I think it's the only option the Americans really have. Now the reinforcements do come on every turn, and they come on in the same place. So we've got to keep those American troops moving, though I fear the American troops are going to suffer greatly at the hands of those German 88s, but we will see. Now for the Germans, we're going to, this unit here is in quite a good defensive position already, being across the canal. I'm going to move these German units up here into these buildings. Now if you're familiar with Band of Brothers, one of the rules I am going to use today is the hex orientation. So they're facing the hex spline, as it were, and which gives them a front and a flank facing. I'm going to give that a try. Now, in the scenario book, you are meant to be using decoys. I don't use them when playing solo, and I've never really found the game suffers as a result. There are rules for how to use them solo. I just don't do it. And I've found the game plays solo perfectly well without the decoys, and they just add an extra layer of complication, just an extra layer of friction that I just don't think you need. Interestingly, the Germans have no command points. Their operation range is 3 to 6. The Americans do have a command point, which enables them to re-roll certain dice rolls every turn, but I believe not apart from turn 1. And their command range is 2 to 7. So what this means is the Americans can move or activate more units before the Germans get to activate those effectively. It's not a chip pool system. You activate a bunch of units, then the Germans activate a bunch of units, and the Americans, and then the Germans, until everything's been activated. Move first is the German forces, and they have a operation range of 3 to 6. Basically, I can move 6 things, activate 6 things. Tempted to let the 88s not do anything in the first turn, just to give the Americans a bit of a fighting chance, which I think they deserve. So we'll see. What I'll do in this video, I'll play through a turn, and I won't bore everyone with me fumbling my way around and rolling dice badly and etc. But what I will do is give a surmise of what's happened per turn and try and weave a narrative into the scenario, which is what I'm looking for when I'm playing these games solo. It's only a 5-turn game. I've got this on the table for a couple of evenings. I don't need to play it in one sitting, so I might play it over a couple of evenings. Take my time. I haven't played Band of Brothers in a little while. The rules are fairly streamlined, to be honest with you. But I probably will have to spend the first turn just re-familiarising. I did skim through the rule book, and it all kind of comes back to, but as with any war game, get the counters on the table, on the board, roll some dice. That's the best way. And no further ado, I'll make a start. So at the end of the first turn, the Americans were able to suppress that first flak gun with this weapon team here. And they moved their infantry units across this open ground, but they received quite considerable fire from the 88s, which basically meant that in the rout phase, they had been suppressed and they failed their morale check, so they retreated back into the tree line. Coming under this fire across this open ground here, you can imagine why that would be the case. To make their life a little harder, in the next turn, it's the Germans get to fire first. So, unfortunately, there's a unit here in open ground that had done an assault fire but was unsuccessful, trying to suppress this gun even further. That unit there is probably going to come under quite a lot of fire from both the German infantry units in those buildings and also this trio of 88s here as well. But the Americans do get some reinforcements next turn. They do get another weapons team, which I think we'll put in probably this hex here. There's also danger of putting all your weapon teams in the same hex, because they then hex gets fired at. Of course, it can hit every single unit in that hex. One thing I did miss on the setup, which is probably just worth mentioning, on turn 4, so it's a 5-turn scenario. On turn 4, this formation at the top here, which one of them is just off camera, these 3 units here. Now they do not. They are reinforcements. They do not reinforce this area here. Instead, the American player can bring them on the north edge of this board, remembering that's the objective. So, my hope for the American side is that if the Americans can somehow deal with these 88s and these infantry in these buildings, this unit, this group here, on almost the last but one turn, can make headway to, sorry, not the camera there, to try and take the bridge there. We'll see how that pans out. But at the minute, this is going to be tough for the Americans. However, bringing in reinforcements just might help. We'll see how it pans out. But this open ground, these 88s, it's going to be a tough ask. But we'll see. Just finished turn number 2, or I'm just about to actually, because I still have the recovery phase to do. But the Americans have been able to, as you can see, been able to make some headway. So breaking out from the tree line here, they were able, with their NGs, they brought on their reinforcements. So they were able to fully suppress this 88 here and partially suppress that. When that came to activate with opportunity fire, they both failed the morale check, so will enable to operate in the way they would like to. However, some of the units did get pushed back. So there was a unit here that got all the way to the end, and then there's a final opportunity fire, which is basically against adjacent units, and they were able to push them back, and then they failed their morale check in the rout phase, and so were routed back into the tree line. But the Americans have been able to make a little bit of headway, but they definitely have been held back by the combination of 88s and the infantry squads. And the German infantry squads have been able to move these two squads in these buildings here and here. I normally would put the suppressed markers on top of the counters, but for the benefit of the camera, I've put them to the side, pointing towards the unit, just to keep my memory check. Now, in the recovery phase, which is the last phase of the turn, these yellow suppressed markers will get removed, and the red ones, which are fully suppressed, they'll be flipped over, and these units here will be partially suppressed. And the Americans have got to go through the whole thing again. But the next turn, they actually do have more units. But the thing I'm very keen to do is keep for good or for bad, is keep the American units away from the adjacent hexes to these 88s. Because there's a massive bonus to the firepower of the enemy if you're in the adjacent hex, and they can perform final opportunity fire as well. And I'm enjoying going through the different firing elements of the game. So not only do when I'm playing as the US can fire against the Germans can fire against the US, but also opportunity fire when the targets are moving, presenting themselves, and the final opportunity fire when the targets are right next to the enemy. And that proved quite effective for the benefit of the Germans in this turn. So next turn number 3, there's another 2 of the squads are off camera, but it's basically 3 more rifle squads and another weapons team for the Americans. And so they'll be able to push up with even more numbers. And I feel turn number 3 is kind of a pivotal turn for this attack against the town and these 88s here. I think it'd be very hard for the Americans to defeat the 88s unless they can fully suppress them. And they'd probably be able to finish them off in close combat, but it's to be able to fully suppress them. And I've decided in this scenario to try and somewhat ignore the 88s, for better or for worse, and concentrate the flow of attack against predominantly against this hex here. I feel if the Americans can break through the German defences, then I'll be able to stand more chance of being able to take the bridge. But there's an argument to say actually fully suppress the 88s as you are doing, and then finish them off in combat, because without the 88s, the Germans really in a very weak position. This is where some of the replayability comes in with the scenario, of course. You can try different tactics, especially playing the game solo, as I am doing this evening. But let's get on. I'll crack on and play turn number 3. Now at the end of turn 3, again I've just got to do the sort of clean-up phase, the recovery phase. By the end of turn 3, the Americans again have pushed hard on this hex here and have been able to make some leadway. They've fully suppressed the Germans there. They've got good squads in position, and in this game you can use half hexes, and it's because they've got 3 weapon teams now, all with 30 cal type weaponry, I'm imagining, and they've been able to use those quite effectively to suppress some of the enemy. And even this unit here passed its morale check in the rout phase. I just need to do this one. I forgot to do that one actually. That's why it's the used marker is still there. However, the Germans did inflict a couple of casualties. So these 2 units here that I've just put off the board there, they are out of the game, unfortunately, and no longer viable. So the Americans looking good, still very risky. If they can break this house here, that will open the door for them. You could skirt around it, but I think sort of feel thematically Doesn't feel quite right. And then, of course, next turn, the Americans, 3 units here, 2 rifle squads, and a squad with a bazooka, with a sort of that sort of high explosive weaponry, will come on anywhere on the north edge. So I'll probably bring them on around here and see if they can move through these buildings here and across and try and take the bridge. So it's all to play for in the last couple of turns. So here we are at the end of turn 4. Well, I've just got to remove the suppression count to sort that out, but which I shall do in a second. However, Americans have made good on this building here. They engaged the Germans in melee close combat. There's actually still a German squad in there, so that will continue into this turn. We've also got some American units on this side of the board. There's actually another units just off camera, just there as well. Their objective being this hex here. So, and they were able to, with some good die rolling, eliminate the German infantry unit that was protecting that bridge. Got exactly the dice roll that they needed to do so. So in terms of casualties, both sides have a couple of squads as casualties. Americans are looking in a good position. The Germans are going to try and move this 88 and rotate it round to be able to lay down opportunity fire when the Americans close in. The Americans are going to try and deal with that with the bazooka. You use the lower casualty rating when firing with a bazooka against that gun, so that hopefully the Americans will try and knock that 88 out with that squad there, and the other squads keeping the remaining German infantry squads out of the game by just engaging them in either melee or combat or trying to suppress them. Of course, the Germans aren't going to let them do that. They still have this 88 here. This 88 was fully suppressed. So Americans have done very well. And in fairness, that's mostly because every single dice roll went their way, and not so much for the Germans. The Germans actually, I compared the quality of the stats of the German counters. For example, this one here is much lower. So their firepower is much lower, and their morale ratings are much lower than the Americans. So the quality of the German troops in this scenario is not comparable to the American troops, even though they've got more hardware, bigger guns. And that's been quite telling in this scenario, which is it's quite interesting. It's quite asymmetrical, this scenario. So turn number 5 next, the last turn of the game. That's the objective that the Americans have got to get to. I think they'll be able to do it. I think they've got themselves in a good position, even though they've got some suppressed units, even though they've taken casualties. So I'll see how it unfurls. And so at the end of the game, at the end of turn 5, yes, the Americans were able to get a unit onto the bridge. How it played out, the bazooka team was just able to suppress that 88, and that had a massive consequence because to do the opportunity fire needed to do a morale check, which it failed. And that basically that event led to the Americans being able to capture the bridge. The Americans defeated the Germans in the building, and the Americans were able to suppress these German infantry here again in this building here. And again, because of that, they had to take morale checks, which they failed. So every single thing went in the Americans' way. If it had not, I think the Americans would have struggled to have got to the bridge, even though they were in that position. So you kind of needed everything to go your way to get to that point, and it could have gone, against them. And I think it's predominantly because of the strength, the amount of units that the Americans have. So I'll just finish with some concluding thoughts. So I enjoyed that game very much. It's a smaller scenario, just a couple of those small geomorphic maps. Played it comfortably in one evening. I had dinner in between, so I'm not sure how long it took, but I'm going to say probably an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour. If you were playing it solo or playing with someone else, it might take a little bit longer because, of course, I'm doing the filming as well. But what is interesting is that there were quite a few options to me, certainly as the American player on the attack. Like, do you go for the 88s, or do you go on the north side of the map, which is what I did in that playthrough, and try and sort of circumvent them a little bit? I think if you could, especially if you're playing it solo, I feel like putting an American mortar in would mix things up a little bit, and maybe giving the Germans another unit so to be able to contend with the Americans that came on through the north side of the map. So you can sort of tailor it a little bit as well, which is quite an interesting idea. But a very enjoyable game. I do like Band of Brothers as a game system. It's perhaps, in some ways, it's more crunchy, I think, than people on first hand give it credit for. Certainly the Opportunity Fire and Final Opportunity Fire, very reminiscent of games like Advanced Squad Leader, but much more streamlined than that game. So if you're an ASL player and maybe you haven't played ASL in a while or fallen out of love with ASL, then Band of Brothers I think is an interesting game to have a look at, because it still retains an awful lot of the elements, but in a much more streamlined manner. I mean, there's no charts, for example, and the counters have all the information on that you need. There is a player aid that you need for sort of terrain effects, but there's no combat chart. So I highly recommend you checking it out if you're in that position. If you are a Band of Brothers player, be interested into hearing your thoughts if you've played that scenario as well. And like I said at the beginning, there are a few games now in this series, so if you're unfamiliar with the game and you're an enthusiast of tactical combat in World War II, I highly recommend you check it out. I have reviewed the game a few years ago now, so please check that out. And I featured quite a few different scenarios and done some more AARs on them. I think the next time I play this, I'll probably play a bigger scenario with more maps, and probably with armour. Quite interested to remind myself how they handled the tanks and numerous tanks in the battle as well. If you've played it or played Band of Brothers, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the game. So please leave a comment in the comments section. And thanks a lot for watching. As always, that was a fun wargaming evening. I'm looking forward to getting to the table again in the near future. And thank you and take care.